unique way to watch games because it gives you can see when you can see things unfolding and you know the result, you can actually pinpoint certain decisions or things that went wrong. When I seen the miss kick from Gutho with 1:30 to go, I started putting together how important goal kicking is in my head because with 10 minutes to go, they're up by 14 and they get a penalty.
Yeah.
It's about 10 or 15 metres out and 20 metres out from the post. And I was like, oh, Gutho's missed 2 kicks here. I was so confused that they didn't. So there was 10 minutes to go, up by 14, that they didn't kill some clock. That because you get a minute and a half to kick each kick. And I was like, oh, that's obviously now when you know the result, you're like, oh, what they've tapped and they've gone here. I thought, I was starting to, like I said, I was like, oh, goal kicking, how important it is. Thinking about all the, successful teams that had really good goal kickers. If you think about Melbourne and Penrith in particular, Nathan's obviously unreal. And then even when he's missed, they've had really good backups. And then obviously Cam Smith for Melbourne for so many years, like how important goal kicking is.
Yeah.
Anyway, they don't take the kick, and I was like, yeah, I obviously would have hurt you even more hearing that, Shawnee. But what at the time, watching it live, did you think much of that, or is that something more where once you know the result, you're like, I probably would have done that.
Yeah, watching it live, it didn't really come into my mind. But as soon as when Gutho scored to take it back out, because it got back to 8, I believe, and then he scored to take it back out to 14.
Correct. Yeah.
And that was the moment as a punter where you go, because you're obviously never safe.
Yep.
Particularly against champion side like the Panthers. But then when he scored that, I thought, okay, 14 points. We're talking three tries now. We're not home, but we're very, very likely.
Feeling good, yeah.
And then it was honestly just like watching a car crash in slow motion. But as soon as which they hadn't done it all game, really moved the ball around. They were just sort of playing right through the middle, and you just knew they were shifting early. I think they made about 90 metres on the first crack and then scored. Same again, second time around, and then controversy late, and we might have a bit of audio of Trent Barrett and Gutho in the press conference. But we've got a text from Mickey from Mascot, and he's highlighted this as well. Why didn't the bunker penalise Liam Martin for a clear obstruction running into Dijon Mustard, aka Dejan Arzi? And again, it was one of those things. I was so absorbed in that actual moment, I didn't even see that play. And until really I heard it from Gutho and Baz in the post game, which I think we've got now, Brooksy.
Not really. I just feel for the players. They didn't deserve to lose that. I thought we were the better side tonight, and then just that last 4 minutes and got away from us. The last try, I thought there was an obstruction in there, pretty bad one too. How that happens with the officiating that we've got and how many people are looking at it, I don't know. Dejan Arzi just got knocked over by Liam, and that shouldn't have been a try. So I feel for the players because they've turned up again on the back of last week. So, but there's not much to say.
I said challenge it. If we could challenge, he said, it's all going to be checked. They seem to take a long time looking at it, and if you're looking at it that long, there has to be something there. But I feel like if that lead's hitting our half and he's hitting the deck, we can't have cover tackles. We don't have the movement to get there. But I think the rule now is if they get taken out, they go that next hole. I think it's a lottery at the moment, which is disappointing. But it shouldn't have got to that anyway.
There were a number of questionable decisions, I thought, over the weekend. The first 3 games, there are a couple of rules or the way that the refs had interpreted a couple of things that I really felt like there was, in my opinion, a couple of rulings that brought some of the lesser teams into the games to start off with. But on that specific rule, I couldn't. The boys probably haven't had a good chance to re-watch it.
Yeah.
But what happens is Blaise Talangi gets up onto Liam Martin. He actually clips Liam Martin, which makes him lose his balance. Liam Martin then, because he loses his all his bearings by being clipped by Blaze Talangi. It was only a bit of knee contact, but if Blaze Talangi doesn't get up and hit Liam Martin then doesn't stumble and fall into Dijon Arce. So I'm all for it. I guess we haven't heard the interpretation from the referees.
You're okay, right?
I'm good with it. Yeah. I feel
Yeah.
sorry for Parramatta, and I'm not pointing the finger at Baz and Gutho, because it's even harder for Gutho, who doesn't, when you're watching it on the big screen, Blaze Talangi affects Liam Martin, therefore Liam Martin affects Dijon Arce. So I've got no problem with that. There was some, like I said, I was watching the first, all three first games. I thought there was some really soft get-out penalties from the referees in a lot of the games, which therefore led to the underdogs in all three games building momentum and therefore fatiguing and bringing fatigue into the game. But you've got to give credit to all the teams, and then also with those top-tier teams, or even though Gold Coast aren't a top-tier team, the other teams were good enough to go on with it and make a good contest of it. But Parramatta will be disappointed. The one thing that I go back to on that play, and this is Blaze Talangi's a young player. He's only been, 10 games into his young career. The number one rule in yardage in that situation, that far out, is you just can't bite.
Yeah.
You can't bite, and that's what led to the try. And I can understand it. I've been in that position before. I've been burnt before playing in that position where you feel like everything's all this momentum is building for the other team, and you're trying to make a play. Unfortunately, Blaze Talangi is the one that bites, hits Liam Martin, therefore opens up the space on the outside, and that's what leads to the try. It's as simple as that. And going back to Penrith, I was, when you're watching the game and understanding, the comeback that they've got, they play such a controlled game nowadays because, in my opinion, they have already beaten teams before they even get out there. Mentally, they have beaten maybe 80% of the games or teams that they play, just because, they can get into a game, they can strangle you with a high completion rate. But when you played a team like Parramatta, who were not only completing really well throughout the entire game, but they're playing with house money. Parramatta got nothing to lose. South Sydney were the same. South Sydney were making errors on Thursday night, and they didn't even care. They were just like, all right, Melbourne score. They didn't care. Still just kept on playing footy. Eventually, it becomes stressful for Melbourne. Same for Parramatta. Parramatta were executing at such a high level with some nice free-flowing footy, and it really affected Penrith. And it wasn't until Penrith actually got into that game themselves and actually tried to chance their arm a little bit more and play some footy. It's what makes Penrith so great, because they can beat you in multiple different ways.
It's funny because we've probably seen that the same sort of model in Penrith games before, but they haven't necessarily been behind on the scoreboard. So they usually get into a real grind with teams for that first hour, where they, as you said, they complete really high, but they might be level on the scoreboard or up by 2 or 4 or something. It's thereabouts, and then they're able to just go bang and then put on 3 tries really quickly and blow out the result. But I think we're probably, you sort of dissect it a little bit more because they were down by 14 and end up winning the game. Like, you look at their the start to the second half, completed 2 of their first 7 sets in that second half. You just don't see errors like that from the Panthers. And then Liam Martin went to the bin as well. So a few things went against them.
I was feeling for you when I watched back and I seen, because I didn't, obviously, not until I was watching the game, I wasn't aware that Liam Martin went for 10 and you got that lead and then you score, and then Gutho gets that one with 11 minutes to go. I'm like, how did they lose this game?
They lost it. Oh, how good is it? Anyway, good text here from Marza. He goes, I feel for Gutho missing the kick. In my opinion, that game was easily in his top 3 performances. Boys can hold their heads up high for a ripper effort. And I think that's the thing that probably surprised me. Going back to when they played the Storm 3 weeks ago now, like, they had all the reasons in the world to just check out over the year. Big injuries, the new coach had been announced. The rumours that players had been told they're moving on. Like, there was so much bad juju around, but they turned up against a Storm. I know the result looked pretty ugly for them.
Yeah.
But the stat sheet was a really dominant effort by Parramatta. Then they go to New Zealand, given no chance, beat the Warriors, and then turn up against the best side that we've seen in the last however long, and arguably should have won the game. So, yeah.
Gutho is always So I'm going back. I'm trying to find the game exactly. It was round 4, I think, last year at the start of the season. Gutho always lifts, and he's this sort of player, and it stands out in this game too, because you see more of the effort players from players in big games or against really strong opponents. Sometimes it's not required. Like the part of Gutho that makes Gutho so great is he keeps turning up when no one else can. So if Parramatta have got a big lead or they're getting blown out, you don't see that side of Gutho.
Yeah.
When you get a close game, or even if you've watched Parramatta closely over 4 weeks and you're just looking at the results, are like, oh, they got a lucky win against the Warriors. Nah, they'd been building to something. Specifically, Gutho, Regan Campbell-Gillard has been really good in that period as well.
Yep.
Dylan Brown, he seems to like his style worries the Panthers as well for some reason, or seems to just get energised by playing some of the bigger teams. He was excellent against the Warriors, and then he backed it up again last night and was really good. So they've got a lot of fight about in Parramatta. There are some great signs for both Parramatta and South Sydney, who lost against the two heavyweights. I think both incoming coaches, it's obvious that Wayne's going to come in straight away and change a lot of things at South Sydney, and we all expect results pretty much straight away with Wayne. I think Jason Riles has got plenty to work with, and the senior players have really stepped up in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
There was all that chat around Mitchell Moses as well, potentially looking elsewhere. But you see him, he was in the sheds at half time. It was almost like an assistant coach getting around the sheds, giving the boys some real clear direction, Brooksy.
Guys, look at this scenario. If they needed 14 points in 6 minutes, they did it in 3.
Yeah.
Have you seen a team like this before? No Edwards, who's so pivotal in some of those close matches, and their big bopper, James Fisher-Harris, who generally plays at back end of matches. Like we saw it in the GF. We've seen it here. They're going to potentially be in their 5th grand final if it all works out. I haven't seen a team like this before. They're just unbelievable. They don't care what scenario's thrown up at them. They somehow come over the top. And it's just unbelievable.
Dane Laurie's game was unbelievable. So how he, not bounce back, but how you collect your head after making that error in their first touch of the footy in the game, you would forgive any player for potentially dropping their head and thinking, oh, they could be in for a long night here. He was amazing.
Yeah,
from that point.
The beauty of this Penrith team, with your point on Dane Laurie there, and Dane Laurie is a talented player. The beauty of this Penrith team, I don't think they're as talented as some of other teams that I've seen during strong periods as well. I just think the culture and the coaching and the whatever they've built out there and the next man up mentality that everyone talks about. That like some of the players that were playing there, respectfully, like if they play in other jerseys, I don't think they're as successful, nowhere near as successful. You look, Dane Laurie's a prime example. When he was at the West Tigers for the last couple of years, you could name on your hand the number of good games that Dane Laurie had. Now, every time that Dylan Edwards misses a game, he's arguably top 3 in the team. Like you could argue that in pretty much every game that Dane Laurie's played that Dylan Edwards has missed.
Yep.
He's definitely in the conversation for player of the match or at least tallying points. So they're building something special out there. They're despite a really good performance from Parramatta, they found a way to get the job done. They will most likely play 5 unless something crazy happens. The only way I can predict them falling off in any way is an injury to a crucial player. And even then, like they still might be able to cover it. They really might. Like, I think Dylan Edwards, even though Dane Laurie has been excellent, they miss his different style of fullback. I think the grind that wears teams down is so much better served with Dylan Edwards. Like, if you look at some of the fullbacks over the weekend, I was watching closely Keano Kinney, and all the fullbacks are trying to mimic and copy Dylan Edwards by bringing the ball back really quickly and therefore trying to gain as much advantage so the forwards don't have to run back as far. The difference between Dylan Edwards and everyone else, and maybe even Teddy and Dylan Edwards are the best of this, they return the ball so quickly, but they're strong in the contact and then still get a quick play the ball. All the other fullbacks, whether it even Dane Laurie at times, Keano Kinney's another great example, they return the ball and they just don't have that punch into the line and able to generate a quick play the ball. Therefore, the wingers like Brian Toto and Taruva, their meters aren't as high when Dylan Edwards is not there, and then same for the other teams like the Titans or whatever.
Oh, well, we could wax lyrical for hours about that game, and we're probably going to, but we have to take a break, unfortunately, Scope. We're going to touch on after the break, so we get the mouth-watering matchup for the minor prem, essentially, next Thursday night. Penrith take on the Melbourne Storm. We'll chat about that after the break.